When a war lasts too long, people stop asking why it began and start asking when it can finally end. The War of the Gods was no different. The struggle between the young Olympian gods and the older Titans was not a burst of anger that could pass in a single day. It was a long pressure between mountain and mountain, between the high places of the sky and the deep powers of the earth. On one side stood Cronus and the Titans. They held the authority of the older world. They believed the order they had built could not be pushed aside easily. On the other side stood Zeus and his brothers and sisters. The children who had once been swallowed had returned to the world. They were no longer hidden inside another god's sphere. They were gods who could ask for their own place. This war is called the Titanomachy, but it is not only the story of younger gods overthrowing older gods. At a deeper level, it is the story of a generation that tried to protect power through fear, meeting the results of that fear face to face. Cronus swallowed his children to escape a prophecy. Yet that very act gave those children a stronger reason to return. The future he tried to avoid became the future he helped create. If we imagine the war, the world itself seems to shake. On Olympus, the young gods gather along the ridges. On dark Mount Othrys, the Titans stand against them. Wind tears through the passes between the mountains. Even before thunder fully belongs to Zeus, the sky opens and closes with unease. This is not a battle of a few soldiers. It is the sound of the world's command changing hands. But power alone does not end the war. Zeus becomes decisive, not because he stands by himself, but because he releases forces that had been buried. The Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires come back into the story. They had been treated like monsters, but they were also forgotten brothers, old powers pressed down by fear. Myth makes this moment important. The way a new order treats discarded strength decides what kind of order it will become. The Cyclopes give Zeus the thunderbolt. It is more than a weapon. It can be seen from far away. It tears darkness in an instant. No one can pretend not to notice it. Poseidon receives the force that can shake the sea. Hades receives the power of the unseen realm. These gifts already point toward the worlds the three brothers will later govern. When the Hecatoncheires enter the battlefield, the balance changes. The 100-handed ones lift enormous rocks and hurl them against the Titans. At first, this can sound like a strange monster tale. But it also shows what happens when a power held down for too long bursts back into history. The beings feared by Uranus and Cronus now stand beside Zeus. The old fear begins to turn against the old throne. For Cronus, this moment must have been bitter. He had once stood against his father Uranus on behalf of buried children, but after becoming king, he tried to erase the children he feared. He repeated the shape of the oppression he once helped break. His defeat is therefore more than a military defeat. It is a collapse before the pattern his own life made. The end of the war does not feel like a simple victory feast. It feels closer to the snapping of a long tension. The Titans who stood with Cronus are driven back. Some are shut into the depths of Tartarus. That place is not only a prison. It is a deep region where old fear and old failure are pressed down so they cannot rise easily into the world again. The victors do not erase the darkness. They push it farther below. Zeus now becomes king of the sky, but this kingship does not come from nowhere. Chaos, Gaia's body, Uranus, oppression, Cronus, fear, the silence of the swallowed children, Rhea's decision, the hidden growth on Crete, and the strength of the released brothers all meet at this point. A new order does not begin cleanly. It is built with difficulty on top of old wounds. That is why the end of the Titanomachy closes one age in Greek myth. The age of the Titans recedes, and the order of Olympus moves forward. Yet the moment is not made only of joy. The victorious gods must remember what they have defeated. They have not merely beaten an enemy named Cronus. They have beaten the impulse to swallow the future because the future is frightening. In human life, those who hold power often fear change. Those who rise against them often believe they can build something better. Myth does not simply mock that belief. It does not simply praise it either. Instead, it asks a harder question. Can the one who becomes king truly live differently? Can a power born from overcoming fear avoid becoming another fear in time? On the day the 10-year war ended, the sky may have grown quiet for the first time in ages. The mountains held broken stone and dust. The smell of lightning still lingered in the air. In that silence, Zeus and his siblings would have looked across the world. They were no longer hidden children. They were no longer names trapped inside Cronus. But becoming rulers was not the end of revenge. It was the beginning of responsibility. The Titanomachy is therefore a story of an enormous war and a quiet warning. Even after old violence is defeated, the world does not improve by itself. What matters is not only who sits on the throne. What matters is what that ruler fears, what that ruler tries to protect, and what that ruler refuses to bury again. The war of the gods has ended. But the real work of making the order different begins after the silence.